So thank you, Gaurav, for doing the session. I mean, it's being recorded. It's not going to be formal. It'll still be the same informal conversation that we were going to have. So thank you very much. And I mean, just an introduction to the extent that I approached Gaurav. I said, please try mediation. And from there, what happened, Gaurav is going to tell us. Please.
That's as short an introduction I've been through
No, Gaurav doesn't need
in
an introduction.
in
That's
my
for sure.
entire career, but yeah, so I'll jump straight into the issue, right? I don't think introducing myself is on the agenda right now. So let's start with the issue itself. So I think the conversation, the issue dates back to about 1.5 years back when I was still in my previous organization, and we were grappling with a high value real estate issue which was going on, if my memory serves me right, since I think the early 2000s. Uh, this was a, a real estate issue gone bad, which had been through the High Court, through an arbitration. The award was again challenged by both the parties back in the High Court, and this was the last proceeding before the High Court. I think was pending for the last 4 or 5 years. In my 3.5 years in the previous organization, there was hardly one or two hearings that took place, and there was really no light at the end of the tunnel. We knew that this is going to possibly, if all the remedies were to be exhausted, this could take upwards of 10 years for us. And the amounts involved were significant. We were supposed to build a nice little sort of office space there. Little is actually not the case here because it was a fairly large a piece of property. And we were supposed to construct an office space there. But obviously, because there were other multiple parties involved, there were government approvals required. For some reason, uh, the performance of the MOU was not happening, as a result of which we decided to press the button on arbitration. I will not be able to share the facts in great detail because it is a private matter between two individuals. But suffices to say that this was a performance of an MOU which went awry because of certain facts related to government approvals, other parties getting involved into it, and we had to get into arbitration. Now, cut to we were then about a year and a half back is when Vikram approached me, and I've known Vikram since 1998, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
We were together. I was interning with a law firm called JP Dadachandji, and that's where I had met Vikram for the first time. Uh, and when I met Vikram again after a gap of almost 10-15 years, I came to realize that he is now a very active mediator. So other than the fact that Vikram, of course, is a good lawyer, one thing that I know about Vikram is that the man also understands the softer side, which is the human relation side of it, very well. And that triggered the thought in my mind that, listen, if this is not happening through the court process, let's try and see if we can do something different. So when I approached the other side, I said the first meeting with the mediators is going to be on my account. And Dave, I think you can relate to this because when our ombudsman process used to start back in the HUL days, we always used to say that the decision of the arbitrator or the mediator ombudsman is binding on HUL and not binding on the other side. That mantra I just carried into the first meeting. We could not have afforded the mediator's cost through and through, but we did say that the first meeting is on us. And that was done only to establish trust that, look, we are interested and we would want you to really meet these gentlemen. Who are these gentlemen? One was, of course, Vikram, who had introduced me to the concept. And the other one, a little more credible, more than my friend Vikram also, I would say. And Vikram, I'm sure you'll not mind. But the gentleman was Sriram Panchu. He's a senior advocate. He's based out of Chennai, Vikram, or Bangalore?
Yeah. Chennai.
Chennai. And he's when Vikram sent me his credentials, I was clean bowled by that. He's a man who has mediated between states. He was appointed by the Supreme Court as one of the mediators on the Babri Masjid issue. So the credibility was huge. And the moment I heard the name and I knew that Vikram was going to be that conduit between us and him, yeah, I immediately jumped at the opportunity. And once I sent that CV to the other side and they read the CV, they were also bold. And once they met everybody at our expense in the first round, I think it was set. It was all set. And after that, as they say, it took about 15 to 18 possibly meetings between me and Vikram and Mr. Panchu. And if we can double that number, that's between Vikram and the partners on the other side. The other side had 7 partners, including their managing partner, and places as diverse as the US, Mumbai, Gujarat. And to bring everybody together, to have those number of conversations in a span of about 4 to 5 months. It was my last day in my previous organization, and that was the day when we finally signed the settlement deed, which led to us relinquishing any claim on that property, provided a certain sum of money was paid to us in a certain number of installments over a period of about 1 year. So that was the simple solve of a not very complex problem, but it had become complex over a period of time. And that period of time was, as I said, about 20 years. And there was absolutely no end to the site, of when this really is going to end. So yeah, that was it. That was it. So about 5 months, about 40 odd meetings, and relentless pursuit of trying to resolve this issue led to a closure of a case which other people had written off. Very honestly, I won't repeat what others told me in the organization about this case, but the feeling was one of hopelessness in terms of getting to a solution. So I'll pause here and I will now wait for more questions from Vikram.
But Gaurav, I think you need to also tell us about yourself. I did not introduce you. I thought I mean, because the credibility that you have,
Yeah, sure.
and when you talk about the
No,
process, it becomes really important for people.
yeah. So no, I last 7 months I have been now, I've just moved from India, having spent all my career in India. I worked with 2 organizations largely, HUL for about 17 years and Marico for about 3.5 years. Before that, I had spent about less than a year with GE. Right. So that's been the professional journey. And last 7 months, I have been the group general counsel of the Landmark Group, which is a retail and hospitality conglomerate in this part of the world, including MENA and Southeast Asia. So yeah, that's about me.
Because actually, the aspect of what Mr. Panchu getting him in was that what I'm trying to develop as for high value transactions, at least high value disputes, is neutral evaluation and mediation going hand in hand. So the credibility of a senior mediator coming in or senior advocate coming in to give the comfort to the parties, but at the same time to reduce the cost so that only those meetings are required with that senior mediator and I handle those other meetings to get everything together. So Gaurav, what did you think of that model?
So when I said 40 meetings, they were not with Mr. Panchu. Otherwise, that would have burnt a bit of a hole, right? When I said 40 meetings, possibly 5 out of those were with Mr. Panchu. The rest were all very credibly, I must say, led by Vikram, but with us as well as the other side.
The
So
other, the
yeah,
other reason I didn't not give reason, Gaurav enough reason to say no. I said, look, my fee, you will decide. I'm not going to. I haven't put any fee to the whole process. So, did you
yeah,
think that was a good idea, Gaurav?
to build credibility, absolutely. And yeah, and as I said earlier also, uh, till the last day, I didn't know whose side you were on, because you never shared the numbers, right? You knew what was a settlement amount I was looking at. You knew what was the settlement amount the other side was looking at. But to have that completely unbiased approach of not sharing the numbers and still trying to talk to both sides to see that there can be a meeting of the minds is what led to this happen finally. And that is one reason I said I've become an evangelist, not just of the process, but of the way it was conducted. I think it really was a fantastic uh, approach to settling a case. I know you are grinning from ear to ear. You're not showing it, but I must put my appreciation on record because it wouldn't have happened without that honest approach. Yeah.
Because I think that's the important thing. First of all, to have that trust in the process and the mediator. And at the end of it, of course, the mediator has to be impartial. I mean, that aspect of it is something so important. So that is why pushing mediation with the right mediator is also important, because that's what I'm trying to push mediation around the world. But I
Yeah.
think finding the right people to give the right good user experience, your user experience obviously has been excellent. So that is why I want you to really talk to people, tell them about it. Anything else that, I mean, I don't know if Harish, Dev, Sparda have some questions. Please, I think, please ask Gaurav. I'm sure there will be something in your mind. Anything, Harish?
What I felt in my experience, Gaurav and Vikram. So technically, what happens is, although we have so many issues, especially in Indian environment, in legal uh, framework, especially whenever we have, say, Gaurav rightly gave example of real estate, and having coming from the background of both real estate and infrastructure, so I know there are a lot of issues where we actually are double-minded whether we should go for arbitration or should we fight it in the court or should we just resolve it amicably between the managements. So those things are there, and I think the first sort of inhibition we have in our minds, especially in Indian in the Indian legal framework, say how to choose a good effective arbitrator, because I've seen a lot of arbitrations where we don't serve the purpose, we don't get the purpose ultimately in the end, right? So ultimately we have to resort to the court for effective reliefs. So I think those were the major issues which I feel are crucial one for us to, which I felt uh, before we are getting into any arbitration or mediation, is a credibility of arbitrator. So, so we don't
Yeah.
know, I mean, which way that can go, and of course the cost element.
Yeah.
Because of late we have heard, especially in the international arbitration, what I've seen, cost is a big element. I'll give an example of my previous organization, IFCO, which is again a Middle East FMCG group. So we were fighting a insurance arbitration, and we hired arbitrators from London and all, from Queen's Counsel and all. So the cost was a big issue because although we tried to cap the fee and all, but ultimately when we ended up the arbitration, so we found that taking a court route would have been much easier instead of getting into arbitration, because
Yeah.
we don't know. I mean, because technically you have to find subject matter experts, especially in insurance and all these technical areas where the dispute is. So getting a right background, getting a good credibility of arbitrator is very, very important. And that's in my experience. So I think these questions we encounter all lawyers in the market.
So let me take this one, Vikram, first,
Please.
because that is, Harish, the difference that we are trying to point out here, and it purely stems from my own experience, uh, and that is the fundamental difference between arbitration and mediation, right? When I have done mediation, it's been completely outside the process of the court. It has absolutely nothing to do with an arbitration under a certain act or a court procedure, which you are aware how long and how cumbersome it can be at times. This was something that was done completely outside the process of arbitration as well as courts. We had informed the courts when the hearing happened that both parties are trying to resolve this amicably. What was that amicable settlement? It was precisely this, trying to find out a via media through a credible mediator who you get from outside. Right. So therefore, that whole pain of arbitration that you are referring to, and I'm sure, and I was speaking to other people also recently, yes, it does take time. It is time consuming. It's prohibitively expensive. Uh, is something that I have not experienced. On all of those counts, is where this experience of mediation gets ticked, right, in the positive. And therefore, that's the point I'm trying to drive home here. It's different from the regular arbitration or forget litigation. I'm saying that, of course, would be another very time-consuming process. Yeah, and the other thing that should be done and possibly has been done, because I keep seeing Vikram's pop-ups on the LinkedIn and so on, is the network of the mediators, right? So I know because I have myself spoken to a few mediators who practice in this part of the world. And that was just to know that there are such people who exist. And if and when the need arises, these are the people who are going to help us talk to the other side and see if we can get something resolved outside the process of the court or outside the process of the arbitration. So that's really, so it's different from the regular arbitration, Harish. And that's why mediation becomes important, because in my experience, it can happen at a fraction of a cost in a fraction of a time as compared to any other process.
And also, Harish, and the whole idea of calling Gaurav was this, that arbitration hasn't served its purpose, because you have an award, gets challenged, lying in court for for his case 3-4 years. That appeal, even if you get a decision, is going to go for appeal. So that time, you don't even know how much more time is going to take, how much more cost you're going to have. So best thing to go for mediation right at the earliest stage. And the same thing I'm doing on cross-border international mediation, international disputes. Get a senior mediator in, someone say based in London, for maybe, like you said, subject matter expert. Get those people in, but use them only for the time that they are required. Maybe as a sounding board, as some kind of a comfort that you need. And then like I with him, I have the meetings separately, and you go there, get that comfort, and then you reach a certain kind of a settlement which is of course acceptable to both parties. So that's the kind of model I'm creating around mediation, because mediation also up till now, this model hasn't really been taken up by people. It's like, go to a mediator, and mediator is also expensive. It's not that they're not expensive, but the model that I'm trying to create is cost effective, and also I think it works effectively.
No, I agree, Vikram. Say, I also feel that mediation can be more efficacious. But practically speaking, I've not seen. Maybe I think we people have to evolve more into mediation to try all those mediation processes before we get into any arbitration or anything. So I think that's how we have to try and test it. But in my experience, I've seen people finding a lot of hardships, especially in arbitration and all sort of thing. But I think it's a nice idea to get
Yeah.
networked with the pool of mediators, and I think that will be time saving, of course.
Oh,
Let's yeah.
and one more thing that can be considered, and I was, talking to an arbitrator, somebody who's not an arbitrator, somebody who I was talking to a lawyer who's been involved in a lot of arbitrations, and very recently I was having that conversation. The idea was to really, and he was also, while he has been into arbitrations for a long period of time, he bought into the whole mediation bit as well. And what can be done if this really has to be documented is that the contracts that we have today, for whether it's real estate, construction, or anything else, we could always have before, as a before arbitration, a mediation clause as well, to say that both parties will try and mediate together. If necessary, a name can be called out, or at least, because to get three mediators again can be too many, a perfect case of too many cooks, right? If both parties can say that this is my mediator, and this is our mediator, and in case of any dispute, we'd go to him, and that becomes a pre-arbitration clause. And for all you know, if you run into a problem, that mediator actually may be able to resolve it for you before you get into any arbitration. And the mediator's award can then be taken to arbitration and sort of, firmed up there for the purposes of execution, and to really bring legality into it. So that's something that we can certainly consider, and I'm definitely going to consider that, because that's good advice that I received some time back, and yeah, it's totally worth it.
Yeah, so I think we have to exchange notes, Gaurav.
Yeah.
I think the
So
important
because
part
I've seen,
thing,
yeah,
yeah,
as
Harish.
of now, we only have a practice of putting DIFC's
Yeah,
arbitration,
that,
and
yeah, yeah,
yeah. So that's a 90% prevalent practice here. But I think
yeah, I know.
let's exchange notes and let's understand from
Sure,
each other
sure.
best practices we have.
Yeah,
So good idea, Vikram. Yeah.
And the best part is, Harish, the look, mediation, you can walk out when you want. The mediator is not making a decision for you. So it's totally flexible. So that
yeah.
part of it is also in your favor. It can't go against you. So that's how. But Dave wanted to say something. Yes, Dave.
Yeah, so just sharing an experience regarding the credibility of the mediator. So, if you remember, Gaurav, in Lucknow, we used to hire Justice Bhavar Singh. So, he was a wonderful gentleman. I have had some wonderful experience with him. So, he was such a patient gentleman. So, he was the retired justice of, I think, Lucknow High Court or Allahabad High Court. And the way he used to handle, I don't know if he's still there. I mean, it was, I think, the 70 to 80% of the cases were solved if he was the so these were all ombudsmen. So
Yeah.
if he was the person involved, so he used to just talk very nicely, explain the background, and give them the entire scenario, what are the pros and cons. So he used to really take time in one matter and really help us close matter. So I think, yeah, credibility of the mediator is very, very important, and I think had a wonderful experience there.
Yeah.
I think bit of a difference.
Absolutely.
Only thing there was that there you people it was like an award. It was like a decision that the ombudsman gave. And you,
As I
but it
said,
was
it's outside the process of the court. It had zero legality involved. The condition was that that decision of the of the ombudsman will be
ombudsman.
binding on HUL. It will not be binding on the other side. You cannot start with a more credible statement than that, right? You're asking somebody to mediate for you. The cost of the mediation is borne by the company. The other party comes all the way, gets himself heard, and gets a decision. And if he is not happy with the decision, he can just choose to walk away, and there's nothing binding on him. So to get into somebody to at least agree to a process, there cannot be a better hook. And that was the learning that I just deployed for the first meeting. That's all. Not that we paid for the entire this one, but yeah, it was purely that learning that I deployed to get the other side to at least see our point of view. And hopefully and thankfully it worked.
Because I just wanted to, I mean, what I was clarifying to Dev was that in your case, that ombuds was actually giving a decision which was binding on HUL. So here in
Yeah.
this, in the mediation situation, there is no
Yeah, yeah.
decision given by the mediator. The settlement is totally the terms that the parties agree. So
Yeah.
that's the only
Yeah.
difference there I was trying to
Yeah.
put together.
Correct.
So Sparta, something from your
Yeah,
end?
I actually do have a question. It's a very practical question. So, as lawyers, we know that any mode of dispute resolution which gives an effective result, it should be adopted. But most of the times, the clients, that is the claimants, especially with larger sort of claims, are very aggressive in the beginning and want to like definitely litigate or arbitrate, right? So in such situations, when you know that maybe your client's claim may not hold good, how do you get your client to trust the process of mediation, despite knowing the fact that the final, award is not going to be binding?
Am I, Gaurav, you want to take that? So that, I mean, you want to take that, Gaurav? Yeah, because Sparta, but the here thing is that in terms of lawyers taking their clients to mediation, I still feel that part of it is going to take time. Lawyers, for some reason, are still not pushing their clients towards mediation. I am trying to go through the route where I am going directly to the general counsels and I'm telling them, why don't you try mediation? And like in Gaurav's case, he will also tell us the role of the lawyers in the mediation. So, Gaurav, you want to tell her about the role of the lawyers in the mediation?
Yeah, of course. So we did, as I said, we had evaluated, right? The case was going on for more than 20 years. And in the High Court, in the second round, it was again for the last 4 5 years. A very honest conversation with the counsels told me clearly that, and it will take nothing less than 10 years before the matter gets finally exhausted at the Supreme Court level. So then it was really all about having an open and honest conversation to saying that, listen, we are not interested in litigation. This is what we are thinking. We have found a mediator and we would really want to go all guns blazing and see if we can resolve this issue outside the process of the court. And to be fair to them, they have fully appreciated our situation, our willingness to settle, and both parties spoke to their lawyers independently and came to a conclusion that, listen, we are going to give this process about 5 6 months and really make it work. That's it.
The interesting
So
thing, yeah, and the interesting thing, Sparta, was that the lawyers were not involved in the process. They were
Right.
brought in only for, I think, once or twice in the entire process, because they want some factual thing wanted to be checked, we needed to check. Otherwise, they were not involved in the process, which is a little different from maybe what people would think, but actually it worked. So I don't know whether that answered what you were wanting to ask. I don't know, but
It did, it did. I think there's no straight answer to this question, but yeah, I got your point.
no. We have to take your question up. I maybe got it wrong. Please, once more. What was
I
it?
hope you got your answer
No,
because
no,
I
yeah, she
did,
has
I did.
not totally. Not She's not convinced. Yes, Vardha, please.
that's okay.
No, no,
She sits just a stone's throw from my place. She can always come and seek that clarification later. That's not a
No, no.
problem.
Really, why I want to her to ask is because definitely it would be helpful to Harish and Dev also. So, Vardha, please, once more.
no,
And
actually,
of course,
Gaurav
we
did
have
answer
a
my question. When it comes to, your client being on page, you just have to be honest with them. And I mean, if they agree to it, then only you can go through this process.
Yeah, because
Absolutely. There were three. There was a managing partner, senior partner, and another person, and we just had a very open and honest conversation. That was it. And a couple of times, and we agreed that, listen, give us some time. I want to do this for the sake of the organization, and I think it is the right thing to do. I feel we found the right partners to make it happen. And the other side was absolutely clear that they also wanted to settle. They didn't want to wait another 10 years. Once those honest conversations start, you clearly end up settling like what happened.
the only thing that is that sometimes what happens is that there is resistance from lawyers when that settlement has to happen. That part of it, I don't know whether Gaurav can tell us, give us more light
No,
on that aspect.
I didn't experience that very honestly, but it's really left to the in-house team to ensure that even if the resistance is there, they are able to come over it. Yeah, because at the end of the day, you are the best judge. And one thing that I must share is that, when you are before a court, you can get stuck in procedures. There can be adjournments. You have fully prepared for the matter, and for reasons completely beyond your control, the matter keeps getting delayed, and for procedures and all of those things. What mediation did for us was that it completely filtered out the 2 or 3 issues which needed to be solved. Every meeting was about those 2 or 3 issues. If I have to look at the net present value of the building today or the land today, I'm looking at external experts to give me that number from what deductions I have to make. So it was a very, very factual and objective conversation, which was looking for a result. Nobody could, intertwine me in procedure and get dates here. I know exactly what are the 3 issues, and I always say this. Everything will have 2 or 3 broad issues which need resolution. This process helped me completely declutter everything, look at objectively what are the 3 things that need to be solved, and who are the people who can help me solve that. If I had to get a valuer from outside, we brought a valuer, put a number on the table for Vikram to see. If we had to do internal checks with the finance team to see what is a probable deduction that can be done to the net present value, we got those numbers, put it in the Excel sheet, and we had the exact number, right? So there was absolutely no doubt in anybody's mind about procedure, about, there's an adjournment happening, this happening, that happening, nothing. So it's completely sort of filters out what needs to be done, and you are focused about that maniacally then.
And the other thing, that most important thing, Gaurav, we have not told them is that everything was online.
Yeah,
Entire
of course.
process. That's important. I mean,
Yeah, of
nothing. I
course.
mean,
Yeah.
no
No,
traveling,
no.
no
So if it
accommodation, nothing.
was, if I just shudder to think if it was pre-COVID normal times, we may not have been able to settle, is my belief. To have 40-45 meetings just online in a matter of 5 months is obviously credible, and that's how it got settled. Because sometimes we just gave 2 or 3 minutes notice to Vikram saying, this is, we've got the number, can we quickly have a chat, right? Can we have a chat so that you know what the number is, you can start conversations with the other side. And by evening those conversations were finished, and I knew what was an update or what the other side was thinking in terms of. So clearly online space, and I've become a firm believer of the online world completely. It has changed the way we work, and I think you are as efficient. At least in my community, I've seen that we have done court hearings, we have received decisions. It's absolutely fine. We can absolutely live with it. It's my belief.
The other important thing I think, Gaurav, was that you were available for, you were totally taking the process through. It was you and I dealing with each
We
other
were invested in it
totally.
totally.
At,
Both
at your
sides were
level, yeah.
totally invested in it.
No,
Yeah,
and
we
at
were
your
both.
level, that was the
Yeah,
important part. That was the important.
it was a big enough case and a long enough case with a lot of history and a lot of senior stakeholders. You know, uh, had a direct interest in the litigation, and that's why it came to my table, and that's how I just was invested in it from day one. That before I leave, at least one big case can be put to rest.
But I think senior management involvement is really important in these matters. I mean, you have to be available for those. It could be a small little, maybe a decision to be taken by you, a discussion to be taken, and Gaurav actually coordinated with everyone in the organization, all the senior level CEO and all everyone. So I think that was very important, Gaurav. I think a lot of people need to know that part also. The amount
As
of
I
time you.
said, it was a big enough case for the organization to take note of. And two, the decisions came very fast. Once the intent was made clear, and you could see that the other side was also equally invested, just like you. I think the approval, if I may say, to get mediators on board took about 5 minutes. That's it, right? And it wasn't a cost that was earth-shattering. It was, of course, uh, it was a process that we all believed in, and we decided that we'll give it an honest try. That's all.
And Gaurav knows the person on the other side was very entrenched in the matter because he was
Yeah,
like he'd seen it since he's grown up with that matter.
correct. His
So
knowledge of facts was absolutely impeccable. And more than
and,
that, I think the way he came forward and the way he wanted to resolve is very,
and
very credit worthy.
what
We are
Gaurav
still
doesn't
in
know,
touch, by the way. It normally doesn't happen, but we are still in touch, and there is a lot of trust and respect for each other in the way we went about closing this issue.
no, this is
He's
exactly.
indebted. He's
Yeah.
indebted because, yeah, this was a personal matter for him. And I'm indebted because it was a challenge for me. That's all.
No, but it's really important, Gaurav, to put this across. We keep saying with mediation, your relationships can actually get better. That's what
Correct.
this is very important what you're saying because, but
No,
of course,
absolutely.
Gaurav doesn't know how much time I spent with him.
I know exactly how much time was spent, and that's why I'm saying that, yeah, it was a pleasure dealing with the other side also. Yeah.
But the other thing, Harish, is that in terms of projects, that part of it is also something which is developing is that whenever you get into a project, right in the initial stages, you have a mediator on board. And as the project progresses, there is someone available at all points of time during the entire duration of the project. So these are things which are developing in the mediation world also. So that should be something that you should also be looking at and maybe talking to your friends, other people who are into projects or anything.
I think, yeah, that will be a good idea, Gaurav, because, sorry, Vikram, because technically what we can have, at least we can name the mediator in our agreement, especially the JVs and the acquisitions which we are doing, because we don't know whether that JV, especially in MENA region, I'm telling you, because say with the spur of awareness, there's so many things happening, but we don't know whether that can see light at the end of the day or not. And conflicts come. So that's not a bad idea to name mediators or arbitrators in our agreement.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
this is like Gaurav said that basically you put in a clause right at the first stage that mediation will be tried before you go into arbitration or litigation. So I think that really helps. So something else, Gaurav, you want to uh, tell us anything else about?
No, I think if the objective was to discuss the experience, share the user experience, I think that objective is met. You have a delighted user here who's waiting and hopefully waiting to, do one more mediation as and when the opportunity knocks. I'm still waiting for that knock on my door. But if that happens, I'll know when to use it.
Yeah,
But
and
in the meanwhile, we must have a network of very credible arbitrators. I'm sorry,
mediators.
mediators, mediators in various places where you have such evangelists like myself, so that as and when the need arises, we are able to not waste time in presenting the person and getting an agreement in principle to proceed with the gentleman or the
Which we've
lady.
already started. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, I've already started
Yeah,
that,
we have been in touch
introducing
and I've
Gaurav
met a
to,
few
yeah,
people also.
yeah. So I mean,
No,
basically
no,
that
I've met a couple
identification.
of, to be fair, I've met a couple of people also.
Yeah.
But as I said, I'm still waiting for that knock on my door. It's not yet happened, but you never know.
Yeah, that's the idea. I mean, basically to keep identifying, because that's exactly what I'm doing, trying to get those credible people together. Because you just, I mean, it's not that you need large numbers, you need just few good people, and that
Yeah.
can make all the difference. So perfect. Yeah. So
Yeah.
Sparda, Dev, anything that you people want to add or anything? Nothing. So what I should do is, yeah. Anyway, what I'll do, I'll stop the recording at least,
Yeah.
and then